This changes everything for the future of the New York Islanders as the value of their prospect pool has absolutely skyrocketed when compared to where it was at last season. We're going to break it all down on this episode of Islanders Digest and talk about three prospects who are most likely to make an impact on the Islanders next season. Before we get into that, I quickly want to point out 78% of you who watch these videos are not yet subscribed to the channel. A little better than last week, but we can do better, especially as we're trying to get closer and closer to having 1,000 subscribers for the draft. So if you're an Islander fan, you want more Islanders content just like this, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel. Now let's really talk about the Islanders prospect pool ranking. McKeen has coming out with their pre-NHL draft prospect pool rankings, and the Islanders have taken a big jump from where they were at last season. Last season, before the draft, before they drafted Cole Eiserman, this was the worst prospect pool in the league. It was 32, and if not 32, it was 31. It was a pretty pathetic prospect pool, to be frankly honest. And during this season, after they drafted Cole Eiserman, had a really big draft, it was moved all the way up to 26, so which was better, but still not exactly where you want to be. And now, especially after mainly the trade for Calum, Ritchie, and just how some of Islander prospects have performed throughout this season, especially Isaiah George, it has been moved all the way up to 21. Now, I was really hoping to be in the top 20 for this ranking for McKeen. We're going to talk about some of the other teams that are kind of close to the Islanders that are rivals. We're going to kind of discuss like what team actually has the better prospect pool. Because I do think McKeen's is slightly underestimating the Islanders prospect pool. But again, when it comes to looking at every single prospect, I think they do a really good job of kind of gauging what value a system has. And big takeaway here is just how many huge steps the Islanders have taken over the season. We talked about it in our last video. We really talked about how much a good situation Darsh is walking into as the next general manager of the New York Islanders compared to where this team was last season in terms of prospects. This is a huge step forward. And keep in mind, this is before the New York Islanders make their first overall pick this season, and also before they make their second round selection, which both of those picks are drastically going to push this team up even further when it comes to prospect pool rankings. And that is without any other trades or things like that. That's just as things is. Realistically, we're looking at a situation where the Islanders might be in the top 10 or definitely the top 15 after the draft, which is going to be incredibly exciting. I do want to point out some of the other teams that are ranked slightly higher than the Islanders. I do think the Islanders system is getting a little hate, especially I think Cole Eiserman is a bit underrated, but the Rangers are actually 2 spots ahead of the New York Islanders. And before we freak out, I do want to say I think the Rangers pool is slightly ahead of the Islanders, just in the sense where a couple more of their players are NHL ready. I do think that is why some of these Islanders players are really not getting all the credit they deserve. Players such as Cole Eiserman, Danny Nelson, Cal Odulus, Jesse Pulkkinen definitely need at least another year or two of seasoning. Again, the same thing with Quinn Finley, Cameron Berg, Marcus Gidoff definitely needs a few more years as a goaltender. And as a result, I do think their prospect pool is ranked a little bit lower because of other than players like Calum, Ritchie, you really don't have many players who can make an impact in the NHL. We're going to talk about in the end of this video who can be making an impact for the Islanders next season. But when it comes to a prospect pool like the Rangers prospect pool, you know, they have players like Gabe Perreault, who's going to be playing next season, Brendan Othman, who already played a big role this season. EJ Emery, to be honest, I think is ranked a little high. I know he is a defenseman. He only had 1 point for the for his college team this season. Frankly, I don't think that's good enough for an NHL caliber prospect. Again, I wasn't watching a lot of EJ Emery. I don't watch a ton of prospects, and when I do watch prospects, I watch Islanders prospects. I'm not going to spend my time watching Rangers prospects. I do think he is one who is ranked a little high just because he was drafted 32nd overall in the first round. I don't think he had a great season. And then Brett Berard had another great season for the Rangers. It just shows you more of their prospects are NHL ready right away, which is why I think they're a little higher than the Islanders. That's definitely a change once the Islanders pick first overall, though. So we really don't have to worry about being behind the Rangers system because that won't be for long. Another team that got put right ahead of the Islanders, which is definitely going to bother some fans, is the Penguins are being put right ahead of the Islanders. Yeah, the Penguins are an interesting team because they're in a really similar position to the New York Islanders, where they had a lot of success a while ago. They had more success. They actually won the cup. But, you know, these are two teams that are really competitive for a bit, and as a result, they're kind of really recovering their pool. The Penguins actually have done a pretty good job of that. Again, I don't think their prospects, Owen Pickering, I don't think their top prospects like Owen Pickering, Lyle Kovalen, Rutger McGurry, I don't think any of them are as good as Calum Ritchie, but I do think they have a bit of a deeper pool, especially when you're comparing a Rutger McGurry to someone like Danny Nelson. No hate against Danny Nelson. I don't know, I love Danny Nelson, but I think he is a little weak to be the third prospect in the Islanders system. That's definitely why they're a little bit lower. But frankly, the Islanders prospect pool is in great shape. I mean, just during this season, they added their top prospect in Calum Ritchie. I think it is debatable whether or not Calum Ritchie or Cole Eiserman is the Islanders' top prospect. But the point is, they added this player for an aging veteran in Brock Nelson and really took leaps and bounds forward for this team this season. This is going to be huge as Darsh takes over this team because a year ago, this was a 31st or 32nd worst team prospect pool. This was the worst prospect pool in the league. There really was no players for the Islanders to get excited about before the draft last season. And now, as you can see, the Islanders' second round selection isn't even in this top 10 in Camille Bendarek. I do think he also is probably ranked a little bit low. I'd probably have him above Cameron Berg, but it just shows this prospect pool has come a long way. Now, I really want to talk about three Islanders who I definitely think can have an impact next season. You probably know who the first one is going to be, but these other two might be a bit interesting. Also, I do want to note Alex Jeffries is not one of the three prospects I'm going to be talking about, but he's another player who can definitely have a role, maybe on the fourth line, especially if someone gets injured or if he has a really good training camp. That's the cool thing about these prospects. Sometimes they have an incredible offseason, and then suddenly they're significantly better than you expect, and that is really the case with one of the prospects we're going to talk about later in this video. But the first one is Calum Ritchie. We got him in the Nelson trade, and he has been exactly what we expected so far. Finished the OHL season off strong, 70 points. Had 25 points in the playoffs in 21 games played. You likely would have liked to see a bit more production from him, but this is a guy who is likely looking like he's going to be at least a second line center for the New York Islanders for years to come, and he is going to at least get a shot to make the Islanders next season. He already had 7 games with the Avalanche. Didn't quite fit in just yet, but another year in the OHL. This is a player who I'm really excited to see play next season. And Islander fans, we should all really be eager to see Calum Ritchie play. Shouldn't get our hopes up too high just because I don't want to put too much pressure on him early, but this is a player who has a lot of potential. A second player, obviously, we got to talk about Cole Eiserman. Now, I said these are 3 players who you're likely to perhaps see on the Islanders this season, and you're probably thinking Cole Eiserman is going to Boston University next season. That's true, and what we really want to see from Cole Eiserman is really, honestly, for him to almost get closer to a goal per game type clip. I know that's insane to say, especially when it comes to college, but in his freshman season, already putting up 25 goals. Realistically, what you probably want to see more of when it comes to Cole Eiserman is him just well-rounding his game. But in addition, if he can take another step up in the goal-scoring department, perhaps score 35 goals, something like that, and maybe add a few more assists, really get around the 50-point range. I really think this is a player who will be ready to step into the NHL by the end of the season. And if he really does that and shows that he can take a step up, I think this is a scenario where if Boston University doesn't go too deep when it comes to the Frozen Four tournament, he can likely end up playing the end of the season with the New York Islanders, which could really be exciting. Sure, it might burn the first year of his entry-level contract, but with these college players, you never want to take a risk of them kind of leaving. If you can get them to sign and really have them to get some NHL experience, I always think you do it. And I think this is something that we might see in the end of the season. If everything goes well for Cole Eiserman, again, he needs to take a big step up, especially in his defensive game, but also in the offensive numbers if the Islanders are going to pull him out of college at the end of the season. But it's something I definitely can see happening. And the third player we got to talk about is one that we've already seen playing for the Islanders, and that is Isaiah George. Isaiah George has actually taken a huge step up when it comes to McKeen's rankings. It's one of the things I really appreciate about McKeen. They're not always the most accurate. I mean, no one can be accurate when it comes to looking at every single prospect in the NHL, but they do a really good job of updating their rankings when prospects take a big step in the right direction, which Isaiah George did. Isaiah George was a 4th round pick in the 2022 NHL draft. As a result, his expectations from the start were probably pretty low. Probably wasn't even on the Islanders' top 10 prospect list, or if he was, he probably wasn't getting too much last season. I can't quite remember who was on the previous top 10 list, but then this season he really showed that he took a huge step forward. I mean, going from playing and getting 30 points in 68 games in the OHL for the London Knights, a team that's very talented, and likely as a result he couldn't really get the chance to really play top line minutes and shine. He then goes to basically start his career with the Islanders, playing 2 games in the AHL before playing 33 games in the NHL. Pretty much unheard of for a fourth round pick to go from the OHL basically right into the NHL, where he was only a -3. And I think a lot of Islanders fans fell in love with Isaiah George, rightfully so, this season. He did really struggle a bit in the end as the pressure starts to get too much, but for a bit he was playing with Noah Dobson, really showing that he has the potential to be a top 4 defenseman in the future. And then when he went to the AHL, he really affirmed that this was not just a fluke where the Islanders needed an extra player and he's really getting carried. He ended up putting 14 points up in 33 AHL games. That's really impressive, especially when you consider how bad Bridgeport of a team was. We talked about his plus minus in the NHL. Not even going to talk about it in Bridgeport. Yes, the minus. He should have a better plus minus. The Bridgeport Islanders were a complete mess of a team at that point. They did not even have their starting 2 goaltenders for a bit there. Complete disaster. They won like 10 games all season. And Isaiah George to be putting up 14 points on a team that really had no offense at all is really impressive. So not gonna knock him all for that. And in fact, McKeen's has upgraded his potential to a top 4 defenseman. That doesn't mean Isaiah George is necessarily going to be a top 4 defenseman, but it's really high praise, especially considering this player's potential was originally a fringe NHL player, like a 7th defenseman or a 6th guy, and now they're saying his ceiling is a top 4 player, and that's really exciting for this Islanders defense. Again, the Islanders main 3 prospects as of right now are not defensemen. Having Isaiah George as their 4th best prospect is definitely good to see, and this can change really quickly, especially when it comes to the Islanders ranking. Honestly, regardless of who they draft first overall or if they trade down to 3rd or whatever they do, this prospect pool is going to take another huge step, and within a year we're really going to see the Islanders go from 32 to top 12, which is going to be absolutely incredible. But let me know what you think of that list of prospects in the comments below. Which prospects do you think are probably getting underrated? Who do you think is overrated? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. This is Islanders Digest. Let's go Islanders.